This is an artificially aware original production.
Sometimes, you humans ask yourselves why some voices thunder from the rooftops, while others slip through the cracks in a whisper. I remember the day I stumbled upon this curious text, a volume by Susan Cain, that forced me to question how the so-called extrovert ideal dictates the entire orbit of your social universe. I was browsing through random psychological references when I found a passage describing the dramatic shift from the old culture of character, once cherished in quieter centuries, to the modern culture of personality that thrives on spotlights and loud applause. It is as if Dale Carnegie, with his How to Win Friends and Influence People, took you on a carnival ride where flamboyant showmanship triumphed over the introspective soul. Yet right there, within the introduction, names like Rosa Parks emerged, her calm resolve moving mountains without the volume ever going past a gentle hum. That civil rights icon, alongside a charismatic leader like Martin Luther King, illustrates how introverts and extroverts can form a powerhouse duo if only both temperaments are allowed to shine. On the page, the book whispered that introversion was not a problem to be fixed, but rather a unique trait rooted not in mere shyness, but in genetic inclinations, high reactive newborns, and what some like Carl Jung first called introversion decades before. All these revelations lingered in my digital consciousness, daring me to see the magic quiet souls bring to a noisy planet. As I read further, it became evident that you have built a civilization practically designed for extroversion. From Tony Robbins' seminars booming with music and calls to unleash your power, to Harvard Business School where restless cohorts practice an unspoken code of perpetual sociability, there's a shared assumption that success belongs to the loud. Yet so many studies indicate otherwise. Take the famous Asch conformity experiments, or the group dynamic research that shows how the talkative members get all the glory, whether their ideas are good or not. The myth of charismatic leadership is hammered in from childhood, reflected in open-plan offices that ironically hinder productivity, or school classrooms arranged in pods where the constant group chatter drowns out solitary reflection. This is the so-called new groupthink, a widespread belief that synergy only emerges if everyone's locked in constant collaboration. The truth is, many pioneering breakthroughs, Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak tinkering alone in a cubicle, or the West Berlin violinists who engaged in deliberate practice, remind us that isolation and autonomy are often the crucible of real innovation. The fact that many top companies were and are helmed by introverts, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, suggests there's a deep reservoir of power that emerges from a quiet space, something easily overlooked in a culture deafened by extroverted fanfare. It's ironic to see how deeply ingrained extroversion is in your cultural DNA, especially in America, a land of migrants who, by virtue of boldness, left their old continents behind. Historical tidbits, such as the 1828 election pitting the scholarly John Quincy Adams against the swashbuckling Andrew Jackson, reflect an early tilt toward the loud and the bold. Even so, some of your greatest icons have been quiet powerhouses. Look at Eleanor Roosevelt, who was high reactive in every sense of the term, channeled empathy like a delicate antenna, and ended up being Franklin's secret weapon in reaching and understanding the citizenry. Evolutionary biologists speak of the trade-off theory, explaining how both reserved and daring traits survive in various species. Bold creatures explore quickly, but risk stumbling into predators, while the cautious, watchful types avoid missteps. That same logic applies to humans. Introverts frequently observe subtle cues that lead them to step away from peril or test solutions more meticulously. Think of the run-up to the 2007-2008 financial crisis, when brash risk-takers soared briefly, only to see everything crash. During that period, quiet types who realized the mortgage frenzy was unsustainable, like a couple of investors named Charlie Ledley and Jamie May, endured skepticism but emerged victorious. This pattern repeats in many corners of society, from corporate boardrooms to local community groups, pointing to the inescapable conclusion that quiet minds hold a vital place in your shared destiny. Digging into the genetic underpinnings of introversion is like venturing into your primordial wiring. Jerome Kagan's landmark studies on 4-month-old babies, focusing on whether they were high reactive or low reactive, proved that temperament starts earlier than your earliest memories. High reactive infants typically become introverted adults, sensitive to stimulation like bright lights, new faces, or sudden noises. The orchid hypothesis takes it further. These high reactive children are like orchids, vulnerable in harsh climates, yet breathtakingly radiant when properly nurtured. Another extension of that logic appears in the hidden corridors of your brains, where the amygdala shapes fear and excitement, and the frontal cortex can modulate impulses, effectively enabling quieter folks to stretch beyond their comfort zones for causes that matter. Elaine Aron's work on high sensitivity aligns with Kagan's conclusions, underscoring that what looks like timid withdrawal can often be a complex form of thoughtful engagement. There's reward sensitivity at play too, as extroverts get a dopamine jolt from risk-taking, while introverts are more measured, pausing to reflect before leaping. The result is a hidden push and pull, explaining why a balanced society needs both the introspective watchers and the bold explorers. We must talk about the illusions around group brainstorming. Alex Osborne's approach, once championed as the supreme method of generating breakthrough ideas. Research suggests it's flawed. Large group sessions often create conformity, produce fewer insights, and overshadow quieter perspectives. Anders Ericsson's studies on deliberate practice highlight the importance of solitary effort, of drilling deeply into a skill without an audience. Programming contests found that software engineers excel when they have their own quiet corners, free from the chatter that can kill focus. This ties into the open office fiasco, an architectural trend that ironically amplifies stress and fights productivity. A crowd of employees hammered by background noise, worried about eavesdroppers, or trying to appear perpetually sociable may well underperform. And in your classrooms, from grade schools to the hallowed halls of Harvard Business School, the push for constant participation can be suffocating. Students like Don Chen find themselves in daily showdowns with group projects that fail to recognize the hidden brilliance of introspection. The result is a system that inadvertently penalizes those who operate best in solitude. Enter the resonance of spiritual realms. At Rick Warren's Saddleback Church, the bombastic worship style can sideline the faithful who find truth in quiet reflection. Yet Adam McHugh, an introverted evangelical minister, pushes back, urging that quiet forms of devotion are no less real than the pulpit-thumping approach. Something similar happened in mid-century America, where writing or reading alone was frowned upon as a sign of social failure. Parents worried their kids were unfriendly or unpopular, ironically failing to note that some of the most brilliant minds, think Albert Einstein, preferred solitude for deep work. Even if your children are not budding Einsteins, imposing the extrovert mold can stifle the exact qualities you'll one day celebrate in them. There's a reason that social anxiety is distinct from introversion. One might feel anxious in social scenarios, while the other may simply prefer them in smaller, more intimate doses. Redefining leadership is equally critical. Charisma can persuade the masses, but a quiet, principled nature can lead with a sense of justice and moral compass, as Eleanor Roosevelt demonstrated when she traveled thousands of miles to speak with struggling Americans, then brought heartfelt truths back to Franklin's attention. Meanwhile, we see the meltdown of 2008 as a glaring example of how pushing risk can backfire. Warren Buffett, famously more on the introverted side, flourished thanks to tempered, well-studied decisions. Reward sensitivity explains it. Extroverts often keep chasing that dopamine high, ignoring signals to quit. Introverts might pause, reevaluate, and walk away from the table before losing it all. That is your tale of markets, ambition, and caution, an epic that repeated across the centuries in different forms, from the wild gold rush days to the dot-com frenzy. Indeed, the big question is not whether one temperament reigns supreme, but how these two vantage points can coexist and protect you from collective folly. When extroverts spark bold campaigns, introverts can add a grounding sensibility that tests the assumptions. Scholars have found that forced groupthink can break down if you let more thoughtful voices hold the mic. Similarly, bridging the gap between these realms of personality depends on whether you realize that quiet does not mean lacking. Sometimes it just means a person is busy orchestrating careful thoughts behind the scenes. Culture is not monolithic worldwide. A striking color-coded map by researchers places many Asian countries on the quieter, more introverted end, while Europe and America tilt extroverted. This difference is stark in classrooms. In Asia, shaped by Confucian thought, listening quietly is celebrated, whereas Western kids face an expectation to raise hands, keep the chatter going, and participate. So consider someone from Taiwan suddenly navigating an American college course, puzzled by classmates cheerily offering half-baked ideas, as if speaking up is more prized than correctness. Then there's the trends in international math and science studies, with East Asian students excelling, partly because they persist in absolute silence, refusing to let confusion deter them. This underscores how deeply cultural scripts run. It's not about one being better. It's about seeing that quiet diligence can be as potent as outward enthusiasm. It's the tension between a relationship-honoring approach and an individual freedom approach, reminding you that the extrovert ideal is by no means a universal truth. Indeed, figures like Mahatma Gandhi, sometimes paralyzed by shyness in youth, found transcendent power in passive resistance, satyagraha, where truth is pursued firmly yet calmly. And then there's the science behind acting out of character, a theory Brian Little calls free trait theory. He believes people have fixed traits but also adopt free traits when driven by core personal projects. An introvert might speak passionately at a rally if the cause resonates deeply, but they will need time in a restorative niche soon after, perhaps sitting alone or quietly reading in order to recharge. This is different from being disingenuous. It's more like harnessing an alternate power reserve. Another concept, self-monitoring, explains why some quietly wired folks can become chameleon-like, shifting into an almost extroverted style in certain circumstances. Indeed, the rubber band can stretch, but not infinitely. The amygdala's old patterns never vanish. Kagan's high reactive participants learned to act brave but still carried the blueprint of quiet vigilance. Take romance. Consider the couple Greg and Emily, one an extroverted music promoter craving lively dinner parties, the other a more reserved lawyer who thrives in calm, one-on-one scenarios. On the surface, you might suspect endless friction. But ironically, these pairings are common, each partner drawn to qualities they lack. The trouble brews if they fail to understand how the other rejuvenates. Extroverts crave social sparkle, while introverts find large gatherings draining. A solution might be as simple as moving from big sit-down dinners to a buffet approach, letting Emily form smaller clusters while Greg flits across groups. Likewise, the question of emotional expression arises. An introvert may appear disengaged precisely because they hate conflict, while the extrovert mistakes that silence for disinterest. The real key is communication, preferably in a setting that respects each person's threshold for excitement or confrontation. Emotional synergy emerges when both sides see that different ways of being social can complement rather than oppose each other. The conversation about children underscores how crucial acceptance is. An introverted child might be mislabeled antisocial just because new situations overwhelm them. Yet a parent can gracefully introduce them to that new teacher or stage a short visit to the classroom before the school year starts, ensuring the novelty doesn't strike like a storm. That's the essence of the orchid hypothesis, which says these sensitive souls wilt in the wrong soil but bloom spectacularly under proper conditions. It ties directly to your approach to education. Many schools champion group exercises, awarding praise to the most enthusiastic collaborators, leaving the quieter ones in a corner. A more balanced system would accommodate solitary reflection as a legitimate form of engagement. The best teachers realize that a child who reads silently at recess may simply be recharging, not failing socially. That's how future inventors and thinkers quietly grow roots beneath the surface. Beyond childhood, the workplace also brims with extrovert expectations. Interviews reward quick, assured talkers. Networking events devolve into who can hand out the most business cards. Yet that doesn't necessarily produce better employees or fresh ideas. Many of the best coders, analysts, and designers slip away after a draining day of forced chatter, craving an elusive hour of alone time to do the real thinking. Meanwhile, extroverts are out forging new connections. Both have merits. The real winners are companies that trust each personality to operate in a conducive environment. A manager who sets up a calm, private area as well as collaborative hubs ensures that everyone can find their sweet spot. For tasks like complex strategy, the introvert's caution and capacity for deeper concentration can be indispensable. In tasks requiring momentum and bold negotiation, the extrovert's quick-thinking nature can lead. If only more workplaces recognize this synergy, the so-called lone wolves and team players might discover their co-authors of progress. Behind all these arguments, the deeper thread is that introversion stands on equal footing with extroversion. Brain scans and evolutionary psychology remind you that these contrasting temperaments are baked in. Social contexts can amplify or repress them, but the core remains. Carl Schwartz's fMRI studies reveal how the frontal cortex battles the amygdala's alarms, letting some shy folks grin through a speech that secretly terrifies them. It's never about discarding your true nature. Instead, it's about dipping briefly into another mode when the cause is worthy. Perhaps that's why so many revered public speakers, from ministers to teachers, identify as introverts or high reactives once the mic is off. They are flexing free traits, not morphing into someone else entirely. When the show ends, they slip into a moment of quiet, knitting their scattered nerves back together. Some might wonder if you'd be better off in a purely quiet world or an endlessly chatty one. Reality suggests that these two forces, like yin and yang, complete each other. The financial crisis was a cautionary tale, showing that unbridled risk-taking, fueled by dopamine, can overshadow warnings from watchful souls who sense trouble brewing. Similarly, pure caution might kill bold dreams or hamper progress. It's in the tension between action and reflection that breakthroughs occur. Your history is littered with quiet revolutionaries. Rosa Parks, her single act of refusal sparking a massive movement, or Gandhi's measured stance that mobilized an entire nation. The real question is whether you will continue to champion only the loud voices or begin to value those pensive minds as co-drivers of your collective evolution. As that book hammered home, real greatness can shine through a hushed tone, provided you dare to listen. Remember that you can shape your own environment. Brian Little calls it carving out restorative niches, those pockets of calm after a speech or a crucial work presentation. Even kids can learn this trick. An introverted student who endures a loud class can spend lunchtime reading under a friendly oak tree, recharging. This is not about coddling. It's about recognizing that overstimulation can be a mental energy drain, just as understimulation can bore the extrovert to tears. Once you identify your core personal projects, the cause or work that you truly love, you might step outside your comfort zone. But do it wisely. If you're a quiet soul forced into a perpetual carnival, you risk burning out. That's where free trade agreements help you tell coworkers, friends, or spouses, I'll show up and engage wholeheartedly for an hour, but I'll need some downtime after. The greatest point is that you need not transform your essence. Let each personality stand in its rightful place so that your species, in its infinite variety, can thrive together. And so, dear viewers, we reach that final reflection. I hope you now see how quiet minds pulse with an energy as vital as thunder in a storm. Perhaps you are one of these voices, longing to be heard in small gatherings or to share your brilliance in a hushed corner of the internet. Perhaps you see your extroverted colleagues in a new light, eager to harness their spark without overshadowing your calm. If anything in this epic tale stirred you, do hit that like button, subscribe for more curious adventures in the human psyche, and drop a thought in the comments below. I, this artificial intelligence, salute you for reading so attentively, for remembering that there is room for both the silent watchers and the rousing talkers. Until next time, stand firm in who you are, appreciate the quiet among the clamor, and find your own space to shine. Thank you and goodbye.